What's going on, everybody? Today is November 28th, 2018. My name is Derek, author and webmaster of Gematrinator.com. Just a little bit more centered now for you. Today we're going to talk about some news stories, but unlike most news outlets, we're going to be talking about the numbers behind the news stories. And if you're wondering what I mean by the numbers, hopefully the intro graphic gave you a little bit of a hint about what I'm talking about. But here on this channel, we talk about numerology with a particular focus on the ancient occulted language of Gematria. This is the practice of coding numbers into words, and this language actually says a little bit more about our reality than we're even led on to believe. You see this language hinted at in movies and film from time to time. Those who study it are often made to look quite crazy, and at first I felt crazy studying this myself, but I assure you this system of letters and numbers coinciding with dates on the calendar, whether it's date numerologies or measurements from date to date, there's really something going on, and it's my belief that a large chunk of our mainstream news stories are actually fake or completely fabricated by this code. At the very least, real stories that do happen are reported on specific dates well after the incident, in accordance with numerology significant to the event. So we're going to discuss a few examples of these, but primarily what I want to touch on is, again, something that I've uncovered over the past week that I think is very significant to this entire code. We always talk about how Gematria is used in accordance with dates on the calendar. Someone dying 73 days after their birthday, for instance. And in the language of Gematria, the word sacrifice equals 73, using the standard alphabetic order. And then in the reduction method, where each double-digit number is reduced to a single digit, the term ritual sacrifice equals 73. And we often see people die 73 days after their birthday, and the riddles go deeper than that. But a really big part of this I'm starting to realize is that when you write out someone's name in Gematria, in ordinal in particular, also the reverse alphabetic order, sometimes the reduction methods it applies, but mainly the alphabetic order, this number can then be converted to a date, and when you measure from that date to the date where they were in the news or to the date they died, you often find really significant alignments. And we're going to discover this concept or explore this concept that was discovered earlier this week more today. And as you'll see, all the major news stories that have come out this week, or at least the ones that I've had the time to look at, all seem to be paying tribute to this concept of Gematria summing to dates, and then measuring to dates provides significant numbers. So we're going to look at a couple of news stories that are constructed this way. The first one, which is one of the best examples, is the NASA InSight lander landing on Mars, allegedly. And think about how this happened the same day that martial law was declared in Ukraine. Of course, Mars, the god of war. And this is the kind of thing that you see in the news, and a lot of people don't pay too much attention to, but when you realize that these things are coordinated intentionally, there's really very little room for coincidence. So we'll talk about that through the numbers in particular as we go along. All right, so to start off, we're talking about the InSight landing on Mars yesterday, or 2 days ago, November 26th. So the first thing we'll start with is the date numerology. 11 plus 26 plus 20 plus 18, this sums to 75. In English reduction, the phrase InSight landing equals 75. And many people would see this and say, ho-hum, it's just a coincidence, but I want you to pay attention to a couple other really interesting things about the gematria of this phrase. Let's start with the alphabetic order, the number 147. This number can be converted to a date, the 14th of July, 14/7 as it's written internationally. Well, the date of the InSight landing fell a span of exactly 231 days after July 14th. And in the reverse alphabetic order, InSight landing equals 231. A couple of other ciphers that we'll be looking at throughout the course of this video are the two large number ciphers that I incorporate into what I call the base 6. So English extended on the left, these ciphers here are actually constructed similarly to ancient Hebrew gematria and Greek isopsephy. English extended uses the current alphabetic order. The Jewish cipher uses the ancient Latin order with more modern English characters placed at the end. So these ciphers produce much larger numbers for smaller phrases such as Mars. Just the word Mars sums to 231 in English extended, just like InSight landing, and that ties into this duration on the calendar. But something else that's interesting about the number 231, when you click on the numbers on my website, you get a list of properties, and there's 3 primary number sequences listed. These are the Fibonacci, triangular, and prime number sequences. And these appear to be the most significant. There are other ones, but these are the ones I focus on. 231 is the 21st triangular number, meaning if you add every number up, 1 through 21, it sums to 231. And isn't it interesting that in Jewish Gematria, Mars equals 201? Here in this study of numerology, zeros can be ignored since they add no value to the numerology of the overall number. So 2 plus 1 is 3. With 0, it doesn't make a difference. 2 plus 0 plus 1 is 3. What we've also come to notice is very significant is that it's not just the dates on which these agencies were established, but also the dates on which the administrators of said agencies took office. So here we're looking at the 13th administrator of NASA. His name is Jim Bridenstine. And just an aside here, look at the gematria of NASA administrator Jim Bridenstine. Using the alphabetic order, this sums to 347. This English ordinal cipher is very closely tied to Jewish, and the number 13, when spelled out, sums to 347. This guy's the 13th administrator of NASA, and this alignment, no mistake, 13, a very significant number to the occult. We'll touch on that as we go. In fact, look at this. He was tapped for the job on September 1st. And the reason that's interesting is because 91 is the 13th triangular number. Add every number up, 1 through 13, you get 91. And he was appointed on the date 9/1. Well, anyway, Jim Bridenstine, his birthday is June 15th, which is 201 days after this Mars landing. And, of course, Mars, like we just said, equals 201. This number 21, also found in the reduced date numerology of the date that InSight launched, which was May 5th, 2018, and the date on which it touched down. If you add all the individual digits together in those dates, they both sum to 21. And to NASA, 21 is a significant number. To begin with, NASA in the reverse order equals 73. 73 is the 21st prime number. Jim Bridenstine, he took office as administrator of NASA on April 23rd of 2018, which was 7 months and 3 days before the landing. Now, if you take 21 and multiply it by itself, you find 21 squared is 441. And using the alphabetic order, National Aeronautics and Space Administration sums to 441. So the number 21 already special to NASA. Then you bring Mars into the equation, which sums to 201 and the 21st triangular. And it's just a 21 frenzy, as we see in the date numerology. One other thing we picked up on with the date November 26th of 2018, notice how this date has what we call standard numerology of 55, 11 plus 26 plus 18. Now, 55 is another significant number to numerology. Numerology equals 55. Notice the prime factors of 11 times 5, right? Well, how interesting is it that the InSight launch took place on the date written 5/5, and it launched at 11:05 UTC. Now, notice how in Gematria, when we write out Mars, it sums to 15 and 51, using the alphabetic order and reduced. Now, if you measure from the date of the landing to the next date written 5/1, May 1st, it's 5 months and 5 days. In regards to the factors of 55, 5/11, Jim Bridenstine, administrator of NASA, 5 months, 11 days after his birthday. And then look what CNN did when they first aired the clip from NASA. They aired it at 11:50 a.m. Pacific time. This is taken straight from the video that I linked in my blog article for CNN. And call it playing with numbers if you will, but if you consider that 55 is 2 5s, it's interesting that the aircraft landed 205 days after it was launched. And then CNN might have even given that a tribute because 11:50 a.m. Pacific is 2:50 p.m. Eastern. So those are the two numbers they flashed on the screen. That's what time the story started playing. And if you pay attention to the time, on CNN or Fox News or any of these other networks, you realize that they are timing these stories accordingly to numbers that are significant in the story. A couple more interesting things about the date. November 26th leaves 35 days on the calendar. In the alphabetic order, NASA equals 35. And it's exactly a span of, or not even a span, but exactly 35 weeks before the anniversary of NASA, which is July 29th, the date they were established in 1958. November 26th, also the 330th day of the year, reminding us of the number 33, like masonry. In Jewish ordinal, NASA sums to 33. The date of the landing was also 3 weeks and 3 days after November 2nd. And why do we talk about November 2nd? Because Mars landing equals 112, like 11/2. The other way to write November 2nd would be 2/11. And Insight Lander in the reverse order sums to 211. So it really does seem like they're paying close attention to these dates and measuring from the phrases Gematria. One other thing I mention often, and this is a shout out to Zenith for making this discovery, but the word lie flipped upside down. Using the alphabetic order, this phrase sums to 317, and this just kind of blows your mind because when you flip this number upside down, it actually does look like the word lie. And so commonly we see this number pop in around fake news stories or news stories that appear to be suspect. So it's funny that NASA calls their facilities at the California Institute of Technology the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which sums to 317. Special thanks to everybody for jumping in the chat. I know the Gematria effect is on right now, so wouldn't expect too many people popping in. I kind of forgot that the show was on tonight. I've been trying to reach out to Zach regarding this whole riddle with, dates on the calendar and Gematria, and I haven't heard back from him yet. So, if he was here, I'd tell him he's going to fall behind a little bit if he doesn't catch on to this. This is definitely what's happening, and I'm going to give you some more examples right about now. The first one is this San Ysidro border crossing story where tear gas was launched on migrants on the border, and this completely a staged event. Ever since this started, they've been interviewing people who, were chosen for the role. Of course, I don't necessarily believe everyone on this migrant caravan is in on some sort of conspiracy, but the whole thing is being headed by the media. And you see so many embedded in there with the migrants. It's pretty obvious what's happening. So the first thing that stuck out when I typed out border crossing is that it sums to 166. This is the Gematria of Secret Society, 166. And it was a span of 166 days after Trump's birthday. This all going down in California. Both Trump and California sum to 88 in the alphabetic order. As far as why this story took place on this date, consider that the word border has reduction gematria of 35 and 37. The date 11 plus 26 equals 37, and it's the date leaving 35 days in the year. Now, here's something really interesting. Again, good evidence with dates on the calendar syncing up with Gematria. Check out the Gematria of United States Border Patrol. And this is what they're officially called. Just taking this phrase straight from Wikipedia, straight from the agency title name. Notice how this sums to 301 in the alphabetic order. Also see the 347. We said that 13 was a significant number. But really, we're looking at this 301. What stuck out about this is that this story takes place in San Ysidro, California, which sums to 301 in the reverse order. Now, the United States Border Patrol is actually a separate agency from the United States Immigrations and Customs Enforcement. And check out the date on which the ICE was established in 2003, March 1st. Like the date written, 301. And here we're talking about San Ysidro, California, 301. United States Border Patrol, 301. So we see there's something to this right here. Well, consider that the date, November 26th, when all this went down, was 95 days before March 1st. And in reduction, San Ysidro, California equals 95. The United States Border Patrol, established in May of 1924, that means it's in its 95th year of operation. If you actually measure from the date they were established, May 28th, you'll find it's a span of 183 days since then. 183, interestingly enough, found in the Gematria of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. But 183 is a number we see stamped into these order out of chaos rituals. In the alphabetic order, order out of chaos, summing to 183. And the reason we know this is significant is because in reduction, this sums to 75, and that was the full numerology of the date that this all went down, 11 plus 26 plus 20 plus 18. Remember, this was the same date as the Insight landing, which sums to 75. And just the word order on its own equals 75. Talking about the New World Order, 75. And here, the border closing, 75, which is what this triggered, at the United States border sums to 75. So this numerology, very significant. The date also had 19 numerology. Remember, I made a big blog post on October 19th of last month talking about how the Chaos Caravan from Mexico was arriving at the border. ICE also equals 19. All of these phrases in various Gematria methods equals 19. There was also a pretty interesting alignment with Donald Trump here. He was 165 days after his birthday, and his birthday, June 14th, is the 165th day of the year. And this is a significant number to the gang that's running our mainstream media, which is the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Scottish Rite equals 165. When we write out the full name of the Scottish Rite, Ancient Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry, we get this 227. In reverse reduction, significant number also to the Society of Jesus. These gangs operate through ritual and symbolism, which sums to 227. And this story was a span of 22 months and 7 days after Trump took office. Also, check out how they said 69 people were apprehended at the border. In the alphabetic order, Mexico equals 69. Talking about the border closing, which equals 69. Even the phrase border closed equals 69. Maybe coincidence. You tell me. Interesting nonetheless. So next up, I want to talk about this tweet I made. And I did end up making a post. I think. Yeah, I did. All right, so I was browsing Wikipedia on November 26th, and even though this guy was announced as dead, they say the date he died was November 25th. They didn't announce his death for another day. And the thing that really stuck out about this guy is that he was the youngest person to die by far, the only one under the age of 75. And I also thought it was interesting that they put his death on this date, even though that was only when it was announced. So it's pretty strange, right? An English footballer, his name is Pitcher. Think about what they call a football field in England and Europe, well, pretty much all parts of the world. They call it a pitch. And this is the type of thing we see in Murder by Numbers. We see riddles, right? We see irony play out, so to speak, through the numbers and through the symbols. And this is the kind of thing that sticks out, all right? You know, as a footballer at age 49 dying, that seems to be a pretty young age. Is it possible that he's a candidate for Murder by Numbers? And if it's true that there's a code and formula to what we're seeing with Murder by Numbers, well, then maybe, you know, what we're looking at with dates on the calendar in alignment with their ordinal gematria, maybe there's something to it. To begin with, the name Pitcher equals 79, also sums to 38. This is the same as the word murder, 7938. And check this out. So they say he died on November 25th. Using the alphabetic order, the name Pitcher equals 79. Now, there's two dates that you can write this way, July 9th, September 7th. Let's start with September 7th. Notice how he died 79 days after the date written 7/9 internationally. Now, if you instead measure to the date 7/9, you find he died 139 days after that date. And also in the alphabetic order, the name Darren Pitcher equals 139. By the way, this is the 34th prime number. Murder equals 34. Now, instead, if you measure from the date of his death to the date written 13/9, you can only get one date from this number here. That would be September 13th. So measuring from this date, he died 2 months and 12 days after it. And in the reverse alphabetic order, Darren Pitcher equals 212. Remember, the words murder equals 79. The word death also equals 97. This man had a birth date with a life lesson number of 47. The date he died also with a life lesson number of 47. And with the master number exception, where K, the 11th letter, not getting reduced because it's a master number, killing equals 47. The name Pitcher has matching gematria with the word killing in both reduction methods, the opposite ways. Now, in ordinal, killing equals 74. The date he died had full numerology of 74, 11 plus 25 plus 20 plus 18. Just the word kill on its own equals 44, and he died 44 days after his birthday. Also worth pointing out, 44 days is also 6 weeks and 2 days. The word sacrifice equals 62. And the last thing I just wanted to point out is that English footballer Darren Pitcher equals 319, which is the satanic gematria of the word killing. And, you know, maybe that's another coincidence, but how is it that it lines up so well? You just got to wonder. Here's another really good example, guys, of what I'm talking about. Name gematria, summing to dates. You measure to that date, you get something interesting. Well, first we start with the basic numbers surrounding the death of Andrei Pushkar, who was I believe he was a Russian arm wrestler. So this man was born on August 6th, and he died earlier this month on November 14th. November 14th was 3 months and 8 days after his birthday. This date was also a span of exactly 38 weeks before his next birthday. And 38, that number we see so often in death and killing. Death equals 38, killing equals 38, and so on. The date he died had tiny numerology of 16, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 4 plus 1 plus 8. And arm wrestler equals 53, which is the 16th prime number. But we're really going to talk about how this death seems to be related to the total solar eclipse. And it's said that this man died in a car accident. Now, I'm not necessarily claiming he was murdered. He may have been. But I think there's something deeper going on with these. I mean, these numbers line up too well. So let's talk about this. So Andrei Pushkar died 14 weeks and 2 days after his birthday. And 142, this is a number I talk about in relation to eclipse sacrifice, which sums to 142 in ordinal. This man was 33 years old. The word eclipse equals 33. And if you measure from the date he died to the date of the next total solar eclipse on July 2nd next year, it was exactly a span of 33 weeks. That next eclipse on July 2nd of 2019, the date written 7/2, interesting, this man died in a car accident, which equals 72. Now, there's another observation I made here. In addition to him dying at 33 years old, eclipse summing to 33 weeks before the eclipse, this man dying, there's another word that's associated with a special number that sums to 33, and that's phi. Phi equals 33. And phi is the word for the golden ratio. Notice how the golden ratio equals 72 in both reduction methods. And this eclipse that this man died in relation to occurring on the date 7/2. Now the golden ratio, just look this up real quick. Wikipedia, we see the golden ratio is approximately 1.61. That's what it begins with. The digits 1.61. Using the alphabetic order, Andrei Pushkar equals 161. Now, before I get too into this, I want to talk about how this phi thing is constantly paid tribute to. Remember how Rob Gronkowski had a horse that finished second at the Kentucky Derby? Well, golden ratio equals 177 in reverse gematria. Using the alphabetic order, Rob Gronkowski equals 177. And on that date, or this was the Belmont, I'm sorry, Rob Gronkowski was exactly 10,618 days old. And the golden ratio, 1.618. So, this is definitely something they do pay tribute to. So here we're talking about Andrei Pushkar, who sums to 161, just like the golden ratio, 1.61. This man died a span of 161 days after June 7th. June 7th, written 6/7, the name Andrei equals 67. If you measure ahead 67 days after his death, you get to January 20th. And this is interesting because golden ratio equals 120, like the date 1/20. The word eclipse also 120 in the reverse order. But what really sells me on this is that if you go back 120 days from the date he died, you get to July 17th, written 17/7, and in the reverse order, golden ratio equals 177. A couple more really interesting alignments here with the calendar and ordinal gematria. Notice how both Andrei equals 95 in reverse. So does the last name Pushkar, 95. And if you measure from the date 9/5, as it's written in Russia where he died, you find he died a span of 190 days after that. And in the reverse order, you add 95 plus 95, you get 190. 190, this is another number associated with solar eclipses. Solar eclipse equals 190. In reverse reduction, solar eclipse equals 73. Andrei Pushkar equals 73. This man was an arm wrestler, which equals 73. Remember this number associated with sacrifice, which equals 73. Also, ritual sacrifice in reduction, 73. And if you measure from 7/3, March 7th, to the date he died, it was 16 weeks and 1 day. Also interesting, that's 3 months and 3 weeks, but won't get too much into that. Looking back at the number 67, right? So we saw Andre equals 67 ordinal. This is another number associated with eclipses. Total solar eclipse, 67. Blood sacrifice, 67. Just like human sacrifice. This is the 19th prime number, by the way. And Andrei Pushkar, 190. Solar eclipse, 190. Notice how in the reverse order, both blood and human sacrifice equals 86. This man was born on the date 8/6, August 6th. This guy's name has a couple more overlaps with sacrifice. In reduction, his name sums to 62. This is the reverse reduction gematria of sacrifice 62. And in satanic gematria, where satanic gematria sums to 666, the name Andrei Pushkar equals 616. And there are some people who think 616 is actually the number of the beast. I couldn't tell you why, but in Jewish gematria, ritual sacrifice equals 616. The date this man was born had full numerology of 118. The words death and homicide both summing to 118 in Jewish gematria. Also a couple of alignments with killing for the date that he died. All right, a couple more news stories we're going to talk about, and then we'll get into the death of Bruce Lee and Brandon Lee. And real quick, I just saw a question in the chat about the Paradise wildfires. I haven't done any work on that. I did do some work on the Woolsey fire. I thought the numerology on that was pretty solid, pretty convincing. If you want to go check my channel, it should be easy to find. Just recently I did a video on the Woolsey fire. It's labeled largely and everything, so go ahead and check that out. Logging on to CNN today, we got a big top story about the body of a North Carolina teen who's been missing for the last 3 weeks was just found. And this came out today, a date with standard numerology of 57, 11 plus 28 plus 18. Notice how the name Hania Aguilar equals 57 in reduction. This girl was from the town of Lumberton, North Carolina, which sums to 570 in Jewish gematria. This story comes out 57 days after the date written 10/2. And why are we measuring to 10/2? Because both the names Hania in the reverse order equals 102, and Hania Aguilar in the alphabetic order equals 102. This story is actually a tribute to the governor of North Carolina, who was born in the year 57. Notice how he was born in the town of Nashville, North Carolina. See down here, Nashville, North Carolina, where this guy was born in 57. The city of Nashville also equals 102. Nashville in reduction equals 39 and 51. This is the same as Lumberton, the city in North Carolina where this story actually takes place. And what's interesting about Lumberton is check out its English gematria, 777. This is the number of numeric ritual, which sums to 777 in Jewish. Also, order out of chaos, that same method. That's not the only interesting number Lumberton has. Check out how Lumberton is situated at the 34th parallel and the 79th meridian. 34 and 79, that's the gematria of murder in reduction and ordinal. Today's date numerology, when reduced, all the digits added individually, sums to 23. Whereas the date has full numerology of 77, 11 plus 28 plus 20 plus 18. And here we're getting a story about North Carolina. And check out North Carolina in the reverse order, 203, 77, just like the date numerology. And as I uncover on my station all the time, the mainstream media is constantly reliving the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. Whether it's symbolically or through the numbers, Christ equals 77 in the alphabetic order. Now, in the New Testament, the second coming of Christ is mentioned 318 times. The name Aguilar equals 318 in Jewish. Notice how Aguilar equals 33 in reduction. That's the age at which Jesus was crucified. In the alphabetic order, Hania equals 33. This story comes out with 33 days left in the year, November 28th. We're also 3 months, 3 days before the date, March 3rd, written 3/3. Using the alphabetic order, crucifixion of Jesus Christ equals 303. And just to show you that the calendar is definitely coded this way, think about how March 3rd, notice how in reverse reduction, March 3rd equals 60. This is the same as the number 33, 60. In reduction, 33 equals 66. 3rd of March equals 66 in reverse reduction. So the date written 3/3, summing to the same as 33. And we know it's not a coincidence because 33 equals 156 and 66. The 33rd day of the year is February 2nd, which equals 156 and 66. Now the 33rd prime number is 137. Lumberton, North Carolina, when abbreviated, equals 137. But the gematria of Lumberton, I mean, we already looked at the 777. We know that this is interesting, but check out the reverse alphabetic order, 123. This is a number associated with crucifix equals 123. Crucifixion of Jesus Christ, 123 in reduction. But today is a really good date for Lumberton to be in the news. It's 1 month, 23 days after or before 120. Lumberton equals 120 and 123. Now, this 120 is significant for another reason. It's interesting that Lumberton sums to the same as the name of the victim, Aguilar 120. Aguilar also shares 69 and 33 gematria with eclipse. And in the Bible, if you read the Gospels carefully, you realize that Jesus was crucified under an event very similar to a solar eclipse. It's the only event that happens naturally that we are aware of that would cause darkness in the sky. In English extended, the name Hania, by the way, also 69. Remember earlier we got a story out of Wisconsin about a girl named Jamie Kloss? Her initials were JC, 13. She was 13 years old. This girl, Hania Aguilar, is also 13 years old. But this story is really a tribute to the governor, like I said. The governor is named Roy Cooper, whose name sums to 130 in the alphabetic order. "13 squared is 169. This man is in his 169th day of his age. Lumberton, North Carolina, when abbreviated, equals 61. This man is 61 years old. Jesus equals 61 in the reverse order. It's also interesting he's 5 months, 15 days after his birthday, because Jesus equals 515 in English extended. But here's where the riddle gets really wild. You know, just a couple days ago, I put out a video on George Papadopoulos, how he was going to be 31 years and 103 days old on November 30th this year. November 30th, the only date on the calendar that sums to 1331. In this Jewish cipher, 1331 eclipse equals 1331, and the date of the only total eclipse in 1331 was November 30th. Now, if you look at Roy Cooper, you find he took office on January 1st of 2017, which means he's been in office for 1 year and 331 days. Again, like 1331. Jesus the Messiah, 1331. Some more pretty interesting alignments here. Notice how Lumberton, North Carolina equals 1009. I'll just type this out for you since it's pretty interesting. Lumberton, North Carolina, 1009. Well, North Carolina teen Hania Aguilar, also 1009, in the same method. And like I said, this story is actually about Governor Roy Cooper and his numerology. His name sums to 109 reduction and 1900 in extended. Governor Roy Cooper equals 244 in ordinal. That's the gematria of 19, 244. Measuring from today's date back to June 9th, remember Aguilar equals 69? That was 24 weeks and 4 days ago. What I find more interesting, though, about the name Hania is that it sums to 59 in Jewish gematria, just like the word kill, 59. And remember, 19 equals 244, just like the Hebrew gematria of the word kill. Also, a little detail I noticed, didn't read much of the story, but they said Hania Aguilar, whose name sums to 222 in the reverse order, the man who kidnapped her supposedly had a yellow bandana, which sums to 222. Because these stories, I mean, they just appear to be constructed totally by this code. One more thing about why this man is getting this riddle. So check this out. The date of this story has a life lesson number of 50. And this is a significant number. The circle O has a Jewish gematria value of 50. The word circle has an ordinal value of 50. And it's believed that the circle is the mark of the beast. But the 50th prime number is 229. And just a week before this news story, North Carolina turned 229 years old. They were admitted to the Union on November 21st of 1789. And in the book of Revelation, it's the 229th verse that reveals the number of the beast, which is 666. And the gematria of this phrase, 313, was coded into CNN's headline. They gave us a 313 in reduction. Today is 313 days after January 20th. Lumberton equals 120. I mean, how many coincidences can you find with these measurements in the calendar? It's just crazy. But as far as why this is all significant, the governor, Roy Cooper, notice how his full name has, he's one of those third-generation guys. He's got the I at the end of his name. And I being the ninth letter, it's an upside-down 666. All right, so the next story I'm going to talk about appears to be related to the story of the missing teen out of North Carolina. And check this out, it's really wild. Before I get into that part of it, though, I want to talk about the very obvious numerology. Here we're talking about a guy who was recently arrested for the second time for domestic violence. So one might call this man a wife beater. Wife beater equals 94 in the alphabetic order. And check this out. This guy was born on April 4th, the 94th day of the year 94. Is that a coincidence? Well, look how old he is today, the date of this story. From 4/4/1994 to today's date, he's exactly 9,004 days old. Today, November 28th, the 332nd day of the year, the name Reuben equals 332. In reduction, Reuben equals 29. So does his last name, Foster, 29. And isn't it interesting, he got arrested exactly 290 days after his last domestic violence arrest on February 11th? If you include the end date, it's 291 days. The word domestic equals 291. The date he was arrested, February 11th, that date is written 211. And 211 is the 47th prime number. The word domestic equals 47. In reduction, domestic equals 34. Both Reuben and Foster equal 34 in the reverse method. So this guy coded out perfectly for a domestic violence abuser. This is also a good one. He was arrested back on November 24th on Saturday. Saturday was exactly 234 days after his birthday. And he was arrested on domestic violence charges, which equals 234. But I found it interesting that this was a top story the same day that the body in North Carolina was found. Check out how the name Reuben Foster equals 148 alphabetic order. North Carolina, 148 alphabetic order. The story in North Carolina took place in Lumberton, NC, which remember sums to 137. Reuben Foster's in the news today because he was just picked up off waivers by the team that plays in Washington, D.C., 137. Washington on its own equals 130. Remember the story about the girl in North Carolina, a numeric tribute to Roy Cooper, 130. North Carolina just turned 229 years old. These stories both on a date with 50 numerology, 229, the 50th prime. And here we're talking about Reuben Foster getting picked up by the Washington Redskins, which equals 229. And once again, we're talking about the 229th verse of Revelation, which reveals the number of the beast. Well, the last verse of Revelation is 22:21. And the number 2221 is the 331st prime number. In Jewish gematria, the name Foster equals 331. In reverse extended, domestic violence has this gematria of 3310, right? I don't know. Something worth mentioning. I know this reverse extended cipher is observed. I don't talk about it almost ever because I talk about enough numbers as it is, but this is observed for sure. $603 equals 313 in ordinal. That's the 65th prime number. The name Reuben equals 65. Maybe we're in coincidence territory here, but remember the number 1331, how that was significant? This guy, Reuben Foster, is from Alabama, which sums to 13 and 31. And then he went to school at Auburn. Auburn equals 77 and 23. Just like how North Carolina equals 77 and 203. So it appears as if the mainstream media, once again, two seemingly completely unrelated stories. However, when you look at the numbers, they are completely related to one another. All right, I think this story about the deaths of Bruce Lee and Brandon Lee deserves its own video, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. If you're going to stick around for a little bit, I'll be live shortly once again. All right? Talk to you guys soon. See ya!